Funding for Amish cooking from Quilt Country with Marcia Adams was provided by
Sauter Woodworking, America's furniture craftsman.
And by Marilat Industries, America's cabinet maker, committed to quality and a variety of kitchen and bath cabinetry styles.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Amish Cooking. As I have mentioned time and time again, Amish food can be called either plain or elegant. And since its culinary history has crossed many lands and so many years, it has the appearance of being rooted in many cooking styles: Swiss, Alsatian, Pennsylvania Dutch, German. So today's show is called Eclectic Amish, a cultural roundup, if you will, of many dishes that the Amish prepare. The very diversity of their recipes using just a few ingredients continues to charm and amaze me. One of these recipes is German apple pancake. It's rather like an enormous pancake baked in a red-hot iron skillet and is probably the first cousin to a popover. Because it's so dramatic and easy to do, it's quite perfect for a Sunday brunch when you're entertaining. It can be baked without the apples if you prefer, but the apples do add a nice touch. There's a little prep work to do ahead of time. Place a 9 or 10-inch black iron skillet or a very heavy pan in a 475-degree oven for at least 5 minutes. You need to have this hot for the recipe to work properly. Then chop or slice 1½ cups of apples and saute them in 2 tablespoons of butter and set them aside, but keep them warm on the stove while you do the recipe. Now we're going to do the recipe in a blender, and it's important when you're using a blender that you add the ingredients precisely as they're listed in the recipe. And we start by adding to the blender 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of milk, 6 eggs. That's what's going to make this puff up in a very beautiful fashion, and a teaspoon of vanilla, and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. Now blend this quite thoroughly, but you're going to do it in 2 stages. Now you're going to want to scrape down the sides of the blender because you want to have all the contents come into contact with those blades that are in the bottom. So be thorough about this step or you're going to have a lumpy pancake. And then work again. I think that's quite done. Now to the skillet, add 2 tablespoons. Now this skillet has been kept hot here on the stove. Add 2 tablespoons of butter and permit that to melt. You could do that in the oven in your own kitchen, but here we're doing it on the stove so you can see how it looks. Then add the chopped apples and just rearrange them quickly over the bottom of the skillet. Now this is a case where you really do want to work quickly because you don't want this skillet to cool off. Now we're ready for the batter. You can see how nice this is to do because it doesn't take any time. And already this is beginning to cook. And if you look closely at the edges of the skillet, you can see that the batter is beginning to set up. Now, bake this at 475 degrees for 15 minutes. Reduce the heat to 375 and bake for 10 minutes longer. Now the fun of this recipe is that each time it turns out a little different. It's sort of like having natural curly hair. You know, when you get up in the morning, you don't know exactly what your hair is going to look like. Well, this pancake has that same sort of personality. But it's always beautiful, such as this is. It's a neat recipe to let your kids do too, because it's sort of a showbiz recipe and it's so easy. And I think if kids are encouraged to work in the kitchen at an early age and do these fun recipes, perhaps you'll have a converted cook and they'll cook all their lives, and that gives them a lot of pleasure. Now sprinkle this with confectioner's sugar and then cut it in wedges to serve. You could probably get 8 servings from this. This is a wonderful way to start the day. Serve it with maple syrup and crispy bacon. And if you've not used the sauteed apples on the bottom, you might want to serve it with fresh crushed strawberries. I'm going to switch from pancakes to something else that's German. Cabbage rolls. Cabbage roll recipes appear in many cuisines, and with their variations, all are sturdy, flavorsome dishes. The cabbage rolls we're going to do today are well seasoned, as you might guess, and cooked in a very robust tomato sauce and then topped with crushed ginger snaps. Let's begin with the tomato sauce, and it's so easy because truly you're not even sauteing things, you're just combining things. And begin with a 28-ounce can of tomatoes and add an 8-ounce can of tomato sauce, a cup of water, a small onion chopped, and a fourth of a cup of chopped parsley. And now we're adding a sweet and sour element here. 3 tablespoons of lemon juice and 3 tablespoons of brown sugar, a bay leaf, and a half a teaspoon of celery salt, allspice, and pepper. And simmer this for 30 minutes while you're preparing the meat and the cabbage leaves. This is very nice, and you could actually make this a couple days ahead of time and refrigerate it. You need to blanch approximately 16 cabbage leaves for this recipe. You do this by dropping 1 large head of uncored cabbage into a deep kettle full of boiling water and let it float around in there for about 3 minutes, and it truly does float. The leaves will soften. Separate the leaves from the head at the core end, and there it is, you see? You may need to repeat this process, and sometimes I use 2 smaller heads because you really want 16 big leaves. Then prepare the meat mixture. And it's sort of a meatloaf mixture without the filler and extremely simple. You can use all ground beef, or you can use 1 pound of pork sausage and a pound of ground round. And to that, add 1 cup of cooked, not uncooked, but cooked white rice, a large onion chopped nicely, half a cup of parsley, and then these lovely seasonings. Well, I should say singular, a lovely seasoning, sage. But now you could change that around, and you could use a thyme or marjoram would be appropriate. I'm going to get in there with my hands because I want that thoroughly mixed, like this. I don't raise cabbage at home anymore, not this kind of cabbage, but I do raise something called flowering cabbage, and I use that for flower arrangements. And it has beautiful foliage on it, rather like a large rosette. And it's the last thing I cut when I come in the fall. And we have the last flowering cabbage on our table for Thanksgiving dinner. But you can't eat flowering cabbage. Now, this is mixed up enough. And let's get on to stuffing the leaves. It's easy to do. You're going to, now, ordinarily, I would pat this out quite flatly like this and cut it in to 16 wedges, just like pie, because that's a good way, you see, to know that you're getting an equal amount of meat in each cabbage roll. And then put it down here at this lower edge. And if this is a little bit fibrous and might hinder you rolling it well, you can cut it out with a pair of scissors, that core part. Then one side over, then the base, and then the top. You're really making an envelope of cabbage and stuffing it with this great meat mixture, and then put it in the pan, skin side down. Let's do another one here. Take another 16th of this meat. Every country has a different way that they do their cabbage rolls. The Polish add sour cream, the Hungarians use sauerkraut, and the Germans, I'm going to reject that. We've got plenty to spare. And the Germans prepare sweet and sour cabbage rolls as we are doing today, and we're going to top them with ginger snaps. See how I cut that away? Because it isn't really going to fold properly if I don't. Side, side, bottom, and then top, and then put it in the pot like that. You can freeze them at this point if you like. Now we're going to pour the sauce over the top. And we have some already made. This recipe was given to me by a Mennonite lady who told me that she had gotten the recipe or brought the recipe over. Excuse me, I had that all wrong. Her family brought the recipe over from Germany. So it's an old, old recipe, and it dates back to about 1849. Now top this with these crushed ginger snap crumbs. I use about 12 or 14 ginger snaps and do them finely in the food processor. You want every one on because that really adds a great crust and a great flavor. There we are. Now bake this covered at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. Then uncover it and bake it for an additional 30 minutes, and you have a superb dish. And this is what it looks like when it's all finished. I'm going to put some parsley on it. Oh, cabbage rolls. This is really a buffo dish. This recipe does reflect the German influence on Amish and Mennonite cookery without a doubt. Have you ever wondered what it might be like to eat at an Amish house? In some communities, you'll find families that serve dinners to outside groups. And we were so fortunate to be invited to one of those meals. The whole family, 3 generations, pitched in to help. The dinner was held in the basement summer kitchen. There is an additional kitchen upstairs. It's not uncommon for the Midwestern Amish to build houses in the side of the hill like this. This was the only time I ever saw an Amish man wearing an apron. The dinner was held at night, and the light you see in this kitchen is not from electric power, but from our studio's portable generator. The men are priming the kerosene lanterns that ordinarily light the kitchen space and hang above the dining tables. This cook pours some cooking water from the potatoes into the noodle broth to further enhance its rich flavor. Even inside the house, the women wear their heads covered because of the Bible verse, but every woman that prayeth with her head uncovereth dishonoreth her head. Gas from a propane tank outside the house provides fuel for the gas stove and refrigerator. The dessert, date pudding, is being assembled as a trifle, which I showed you how to make on an earlier segment. This old iron stove is a real treasure. Antique dealers and collectors prize them, as you can imagine. The tables are all set for the guests, which was a Mennonite young adult Sunday school class. Grace is said before the meal. The Amish do not use flower centerpieces, but do use a showy dessert in the middle of the table instead, such as these fruit compotes and the date pudding trifles. The food is served family style and includes seconds of everything. The menu included fried chicken, mashed potatoes and gravy, ham, several vegetables, homemade bread and apple butter, and of course, noodles, for this is the noodle belt here in northern Indiana. And as always, to round out a good Amish dinner, we finish with pie. Although the Amish lead a very austere life, they're quite sociable. Listed here in their weekly newspaper, The Budget, you read about events and happenings that indicate just how active they are. From Etheridge, Tennessee, we and the Andy Yoders spent the weekend at the settlement in Nunley and attended church services there, a 65-mile trip. It took 12 hours to get there and 13 and a half hours to get home. We gave our horses an hour's rest and eating period at Freeman's Lumberyard. From Kelowna, Iowa, Katie Lapp has not been well all summer, but was able to attend the Mud Valley Ice Cream Supper on Friday Eve at the Levi Millers. We had plenty of food, 11 freezers of homemade ice cream. The younger folks enjoyed volleyball, and the rest visited. You recall how I have mentioned that the Amish find pleasure in simple things? From Millersburg, Ohio. Mom now has a list of over 30 songbirds which were sighted in our woods. The bluebirds have their second set of 4 little ones hatched. I love this paper. Well, enough of this. Let's get back to cooking. A perfect accompaniment to cabbage rolls is potato pancakes. They're delicate, almost lacy, and a snap to prepare in the blender. We've really given this blender a workout today. Again, put the ingredients in the order, put the ingredients in the blender in the order that they're listed in the recipe. And we start with 1/4 cup of milk, 2 eggs, a rather small onion cut in 4ths, and 2 tablespoons of parsley, and 3 3 tablespoons of flour and a half a teaspoon of salt, pepper, and baking powder, dash of Worcestershire. This has got some snap, you see, and a grating of fresh nutmeg. And I'm going to give this a quick whiz just to combine this portion of it. There. And then add 2 potatoes, medium-sized, and have them cut in about inch cubes, I would say. And these have been prepared ahead of time and kept in water that had a little bit of fruit fresh in it. So that has kept them from turning brown. Now, you do not want these pureed. You simply want them finely chopped. I'm going to turn this up to a little higher speed. Now I'm going into high gear. Let's scoop these down so they hit the blades. Oh, they're coming along just fine. With the blender, you do have to do this periodically, and that's a little bit different than the food processor. I have done this in the food processor, but I don't like the texture quite as well. Potato pancakes can be served any number of ways. I like serving them sometimes as really an hors d'oeuvre, and we'll put a dollop of sour cream on the pancake and then top it with a little bit of caviar. Now that's truly elegant. The Jewish people make potato pancakes, and they call them latkes. So you see, a lot of cultures make potato pancakes just like they make cabbage rolls. There, I think we're ready to begin. Now, to your skillet, and I'm using an electric skillet again, heat it to 360 degrees, add about a tablespoon of oil, maybe a little more, and use any kind of oil. I'm partial to peanut oil, as you might guess, because I've used it so often. You've probably figured that out. And then we're going to add the potato batter, and add about a tablespoon of batter for each pancake, and spread it out to a 3-inch diameter pancake. Sometimes these are also good for brunch. They're a nice accompaniment to omelets. Anything I do on this show, if I can make all these things in a half hour, you can certainly manage them all at your house in a similar time span. Now you want to let these cook at, again, 360 degrees for about 2 minutes on each side. This will vary a little bit from your skillet to skillet because my temperature might be a little bit different than the temperature on your skillet. The, let's see, no, they're doing okay. Let's get them. I always have to peek, you see, it's irresistible. Ah, very good. Flip. Ooh, perfect. Perfect. I always feel like clapping when that happens, or somebody should. Well, forget that one. Here we are. Oh, look good, don't they? This is the way they appear when they're all finished. Potato pancakes are so simple to do. I say that about a lot of these recipes, don't I? But it's true. These are delectable and can be made at the last minute, as you've seen today. Also, as I mentioned, I do serve them with other things and in other ways. They're absolutely out of this world with charbroiled steak. The last recipe is an Amish variation of those familiar dessert ingredients: flour, brown sugar, and spices. A rich brown sugar sauce is poured over the top of a quickly prepared cinnamon-flavored batter. The cake rises to the top during the baking, and the pecans add really a nice texture. Of course, we're going to begin with a familiar brown sauce that all we Midwesterners like. And you want to combine 2 cups of brown sugar in a saucepan and add 1.5 cups of water and 2 tablespoons of butter and a speck of salt and a teaspoon of vanilla. Now, let that boil rather rapidly, uncovered, for 5 minutes while you're preparing the cake part, which is a snap. In a mixer bowl, combine 2 cups of flour, a cup of sugar, 2 teaspoons of baking powder and cinnamon, because that's the flavor we're using today, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And to combine this quickly. In a small bowl, combine a cup of milk and 2 tablespoons of butter, a splash of vanilla. When I say splash, I mean a teaspoon, and whip that up quickly. And then pour the wet ingredients over the dry and blend just until it's mixed, which will be just a minute or 2. And then you want to add your nuts. Now you can add them at this stage, and I'm going to use a cup of chopped nuts, or you could sprinkle them over the top when the cake is done. It doesn't matter either way. I think that's quite finished. Sometimes these were called brown syrup puddings, but at our house we always called them cinnamon puddings. And then transfer that batter to a greased 9 by 13 inch pan. It's quite stiff, as you can see, and smooth it out. This is a very economical dish. I, however, have never seen it made without nuts. You really do need that. Smooth this out like this. How many of you have ever seen cinnamon bark? Actually, cinnamon comes from the bark of the tree that lives in Ceylon, but what we get here is mostly cinnamon from India and from the Malabar Coast area. These sticks are rather expensive, but they're very attractive to use in mulled cider and in pickles and in fruit compotes. And my director, Denise, grinds these sticks up with her coffee beans and makes a cinnamon coffee. So they do have lots of uses, and they're very, very fresh tasting. Now, over the top, I want you to pour the syrup, which has cooled a little bit. One of my favorite snacks that uses cinnamon is to prepare cinnamon toast fingers on Sunday night and serve them with a pot of hot chocolate. And my husband and I snack on that while we watch Masterpiece Theater. I always thought it would be fun to be Lady Bellamy, but I seem to have ended up being Mrs. Bridges in the kitchen. Bake this at 350 degrees for 40 minutes. And then when it's all finished, I'll show you how to fix it up for presentation. And here's what it looks like. Now on this one, we left the pecans whole on top. Isn't that pretty? And see right down here along the edge, you can see the brown sugar syrup has gone to the bottom. And as I told you, the cake has come to the top. It never fails. Thank goodness. Now this can be dipped out with a spoon, or it can be cut into squares. And today we'll do the squares. I think the dish really does need whipping cream. And, oh, yum. Now some people serve this upside down with the brown sauce on top, but I really prefer the nuts. I think it just looks a little fancier. And let's spot the plate. You know how I feel about messy plates. And then give it this liberal dollop of whipped cream. And let's give it a fruit garnish. Flower garnish. What am I saying? I'm faintly daffy today. Here, what I'm using, the green is lady's mantle. It's an old flower. It's mentioned in Shakespeare's plays several times. And this purple flower is the original geranium. There we are. This simple melange of ready and available ingredients has turned into a heavenly dessert, as you can see. I think we've done some very interesting foods today. We began with this German apple pancake, and I want you to keep this in mind when you have house guests and you want a little more than bacon and eggs to serve them in the morning. German cabbage rolls, a rather lusty dish. Try it with a glass of beer and dark rye bread. Potato pancakes, a perfect accompaniment with cabbage rolls. But don't forget, they're also good with charbroiled steak and baked brisket. And lastly, cinnamon pudding. How to describe it? Well, I'm running out of adjectives. Trust me, it's just plain good. Today's quilt pattern is a rabbit foot variation, and it was made in 1922. Since today's show was titled Eclectic Amish, this is certainly the right quilt to show you because it's definitely eclectic. You turn over this rather somber red and black quilt and find this astonishing orange backing that's almost fluorescent. Since the stitching is all in black, the great number of variations of patterns becomes immediately apparent. We have here feathers and fans, pineapples, flowers, and squares. All the stops were pulled out for this one. As I mentioned, this is a rabbit's foot pattern, and there are many quilting patterns named after animal tracks, such as bear's paw, goose foot, and duck's foot in the mud. This woman had a lot of fun doing this quilt. These rabbit feet were dancing double time. Until I see you again, essa gut, eat good.
All recipes seen in this series are available in Marcia Adams' book, Cooking from Quilt Country. This hardcover contains nearly 200 Amish and Mennonite recipes with color photographs and descriptions of the food and folkways of America's heartland. The cost of the book is $24.95 plus handling. Please have your credit card ready when you call 1-800-325-2667. Series 2 of Amish Cooking from Quilt Country is available on home video for $59.95 plus shipping. All 13 programs in this second series are compiled on 3 VHS cassettes. Call 1-800-325-2667 for credit card orders.
Funding for Amish Cooking from Quilt Country was provided by